Let me start with something that sounds uncomfortable but true. A lot of people don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they're strong in the wrong place. You've probably seen this before. Someone is clearly smart, experienced, capable. Put them in one situation and they dominate. Put them somewhere else and suddenly they struggle. They hesitate, they misjudge, they make mistakes that don't even look like them. And everyone watching thinks, what happened to this person? We usually explain it the wrong way. We say things like, they weren't prepared, they lost confidence, they cracked under pressure. But very often, none of that is true. What actually changed wasn't the person, it was the environment. Most of us grow up believing that ability is portable. If you're good everywhere. If you're smart, you'll figure it out. If you work hard enough, you'll adapt. That belief feels fair, it feels motivating. It's also incomplete, because ability doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lives inside systems, rules, norms, pace, expectations. Change those, and the same person can look completely different. Think about language for a second. Someone can be confident, funny, persuasive in their native language. Put them in a language they barely speak, suddenly they sound unsure, slower, less intelligent. Did their brain change? Of course not. The environment changed. Now imagine that effect but applied to everything. Social rules, professional habits, unwritten expectations. That's what most people underestimate. We're not as flexible as we think. We don't operate on raw intelligence alone. We rely heavily on familiarity, patterns we've seen before, situations we've rehearsed 1,000 times. That familiarity creates speed, and speed creates confidence. This is why some people seem unbeatable in certain settings. They know exactly what matters and what doesn't. They know when to speak and when to stay quiet. They know which signals mean danger and which are noise. They're not guessing. They're reading a map they've memorized. Now, take that map away. Drop them into a new terrain. The rules aren't written down. The signals mean different things. The pace feels wrong. All of a sudden, they're reacting instead of anticipating. And that's where strength starts to look like weakness. Here's the part that really messes with people. When strong individuals struggle, they often try harder. They push more. They assert more. They double down on the behaviors that used to work. But those behaviors were never universally powerful. They were context-dependent. So instead of regaining control, they look increasingly out of sync. Meanwhile, someone else, less impressive on paper, thrives. Not because they're smarter, but because the environment suits them better. They understand the rhythm. They know the shortcuts. They feel at home. This is deeply frustrating to watch, especially if you value merit. We want to believe that the best person wins, but reality doesn't reward best in abstract terms. It rewards best fit. This is why changing environments can completely reset power dynamics. A person who felt intimidating in one setting becomes manageable in another. Not because you weakened them, but because you removed the conditions that amplified them. And here's the part people rarely admit. Most confidence is borrowed. It's borrowed from routine, from predictability, from knowing what's coming next. Take that away, and even very capable people feel exposed. They hesitate not because they're unsure of themselves, but because they're unsure of the rules. That hesitation is costly. It slows decisions, it creates openings, it invites pressure. And once someone is reacting instead of leading, the balance has already shifted. This is why some people seem to lose their edge when circumstances change. New job, new culture, new role. Same person, different outcome. And the worst part, they often blame themselves. They think they've become worse. In reality, they've just been moved away from where they were strongest. Understanding this changes how you see competition. It stops being about overpowering someone and starts being about positioning, about where things happen, about which environment favors which behaviors. This isn't about manipulation or tricks. It's about recognizing that strength is not absolute, it's conditional. And once you see that, you stop asking, how do I beat someone stronger than me? You start asking a much more effective question. Where does their strength stop working? That question alone changes everything because it shifts the focus from confrontation to context, from force to placement, from ego to awareness. And that's where real advantage begins. There's a reason some people seem effortlessly confident in certain situations. It's not because they're fearless, and it's not because they've figured life out. It's because they're standing on familiar ground. Everyone has a home field. It might not look like one at first. There's no sign, no border, but you can feel it. It's the environment where things make sense without effort. You know what to say. You know how things usually go. You know which risks are real and which are just noise. That's a home field. And the scary part is how invisible it is when you're inside it. When you're on your home field, confidence feels natural. You don't think, I'm confident right now. You just act. Decisions come faster. Reactions are smoother. Mistakes don't shake you as much. From the outside, it looks like talent. From the inside, it feels like comfort. This is why people often confuse familiarity with ability. They watch someone perform well and assume, this person is just good. What they don't see is how perfectly the environment fits that person. The rules align with their habits, the pace matches their thinking speed. The expectations reward what they already do well. It's not magic, it's alignment. Take that same person and change just a few variables. Different norms, different tempo, different signals, nothing dramatic. And suddenly, they're not leading anymore. They're waiting. They're watching others before making a move. They ask more questions. They speak less confidently. Again, nothing about their core ability changed, but their internal map no longer matches the territory. Here's something most people don't like to admit. A lot of expertise is local. It's tied to specific conditions. We don't just learn skills, we learn where those skills work. This is why people who dominate in one setting often struggle in another. Not because they're rigid, but because their instincts were trained for a different game. On a home field, instincts feel reliable. Often, instincts feel risky, so people hesitate. And hesitation is expensive. It costs momentum, it costs presence, it signals uncertainty. Others sense it immediately, not consciously, but socially. Humans are extremely sensitive to who feels in place and who doesn't. We read it in posture, in timing, in how quickly someone responds. Someone who belongs doesn't rush to prove it. Someone who doesn't often overcompensates. That's another tell. When people leave their home field, they often talk more, they explain more, they justify more. They're trying to rebuild lost certainty with words, and that usually backfires. Because confidence is not convincing, it's contagious, and it spreads best in environments where the person already feels anchored. Now, flip the perspective. Think about times when you felt unusually capable. Not because you were smarter than usual, but because everything around you felt predictable. You knew the rules, you knew the expectations, you knew how success was measured. That clarity freed up mental space. You weren't second-guessing yourself, you were executing. That's what a home field really provides. Not strength, but clarity. And clarity is a multiplier. This is why changing environments can be so destabilizing. People don't just lose advantages, they lose feedback. They're no longer sure which signals matter, so they slow down. They become cautious. And caution is often misread as weakness. But it's not weakness, it's displacement. Here's the important part. You don't need to defeat someone on their home field. You just need to get them off it. Once they're no longer operating from familiarity, the balance resets. Not permanently, not unfairly, just realistically. Because now both sides are dealing with uncertainty. And when uncertainty is shared, raw advantage matters less. That's the quiet shift most people miss. They think competition is about strength versus strength. In reality, it's often about comfort versus discomfort, about who feels oriented and who doesn't. And once you understand that, you stop trying to overpower people where they're strongest. You start paying attention to where they feel most at home, because that's where their edge lives. And edges disappear the moment the ground changes. There's a specific moment when advantage breaks. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. Most people miss it. But once it happens, the outcome starts drifting in a new direction. That moment is when someone realizes they're no longer in control of the environment. Not losing, not failing, just no longer steering. On their home field, people don't think about control. They just have it. They know where conversations are going. They know how decisions usually unfold. They can sense when to push and when to pause. Everything feels predictable enough. But take them out of that setting, and the first thing they lose isn't power, it's timing. They hesitate before speaking. They wait for cues that never come. They look for familiar signals and don't find them. That hesitation seems small, but it's everything. Because the person who moves second is already reacting. And once you're reacting, you're not setting direction anymore. You're adjusting. Here's what's really happening in that moment. Their internal model no longer matches reality. The assumptions they rely on about how people respond, what matters, what doesn't, stop working. So they slow down to recalibrate. Meanwhile, the situation keeps moving. Others step in, decisions get made, momentum shifts. Not because anyone planned it, but because hesitation creates openings. This is why advantage doesn't just disappear all at once. It leaks. A pause here, a misread there, a moment of uncertainty that compounds. And once someone feels slightly behind, they start protecting themselves. They become more cautious. Caution feels safe, but it's expensive. It signals uncertainty to others. Again, not verbally, but socially. People respond differently when they sense someone is unsure. They interrupt more, they challenge more, they test boundaries. On a home field, those tests rarely happen. Off it, they appear immediately. That's another subtle shift. The environment starts pushing back, not aggressively, just enough to see what happens. And when the person hesitates again, the environment learns something. This person isn't grounded here. That knowledge spreads fast, sometimes in minutes, sometimes in seconds. Now the advantage is truly gone. Because advantage isn't just about ability, it's about perceived stability. Who seems comfortable, who seems anchored, who seems like they belong. Once that perception shifts, everything else follows. Here's the part people find uncomfortable. You don't need to outperform someone to neutralize their advantage. You don't need to be better. You just need them to be slightly off balance, slightly uncertain, slightly slower than usual. That's enough. Because confidence amplifies ability, and uncertainty dampens it. This is why strong people often look worse than average once their advantage disappears. They're used to operating with a multiplier. Take the multiplier away, and the drop feels dramatic. But nothing about them collapsed. The environment just stopped boosting them. And when that boost is gone, the playing field flattens. Now decisions matter more than instincts. Awareness matters more than routine. And presence matters more than raw skill. This is where many people misread what's happening. They think the strong person is falling apart. They're not. They're just human again, subject to the same doubts and delays as everyone else. The only difference is that they're not used to it, and that unfamiliarity makes them even slower. That's the critical window. Not a moment to attack, a moment to let things continue unfolding. Because once someone realizes they're no longer on familiar ground, they start trying to regain it. They push old behaviors into a new context. They speak more, they assert more, they try to recreate the old environment through force. And that rarely works, because environments don't bend easily. They resist. And resistance creates friction. which creates more hesitation, which creates a downward spiral. All from one quiet shift. Not a confrontation, not a challenge, just a change in where things happen. That's the moment advantage disappears, not when someone loses, but when the ground under them stops cooperating. What makes this so powerful is how often it happens without us noticing. This isn't some rare, dramatic situation. It shows up everywhere. Work, creative fields, social situations, even personal relationships. Let's start with work. You've probably seen someone who's incredibly effective inside a specific structure. They know the internal rules. They understand how decisions really get made. They know which conversations matter and which don't. Inside that environment, they move fast. But move them to a different team, a different company, or even a different role, and things change. Suddenly, they're quieter. They ask more questions. They seem less decisive. Not because they forgot how to work, but because the shortcuts they relied on are gone. The unwritten rules changed, and without those rules, everything takes longer. Now look at creative work. Some creators thrive on certain platforms. They understand the rhythm. They know what gets attention. They feel the audience instinctively. Move them to a different format or platform, and they struggle. Same creativity, same effort, different outcome. Why? Because creativity isn't just talent. It's also context. It's knowing which risks are rewarded and which are ignored. Change the environment, and even strong creators hesitate. They second-guess themselves. Meanwhile, someone else, less experienced overall, looks confident simply because they're familiar with the space. Social situations work the same way. Some people are magnetic in one setting and awkward in another. At a dinner table, they're sharp and relaxed. At a formal event, they're stiff and unsure. Again, nothing about their personality changed. The environment stopped supporting their natural way of interacting. Relationships might be the clearest example. People often feel dynamics shift when context changes. A person who felt dominant in one setting feels uncertain in another. Private versus public, one-on-one versus group, familiar space versus unfamiliar territory. These shifts aren't accidental. They change who feels grounded, and whoever feels grounded usually sets the tone. That's the pattern. The person who feels at home speaks with less effort. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. Others adjust to them, not because they demand it, but because comfort creates gravity. Now here's the uncomfortable realization. Most people spend their lives trying to improve themselves, their skills, their confidence, their competence. Very few people pay attention to where they perform best. They assume success is portable, but as you've seen, it's not always. Sometimes the fastest way to change an outcome isn't to become better, it's to change the setting. That's why certain conversations feel impossible in one place and easy in another. Why certain decisions stall in one environment and flow in another. Why someone who feels intimidating in one context feels ordinary in another. Once you start noticing this, you can't unsee it. You begin to realize how much of life is shaped by invisible context. Who speaks first? Who feels relaxed? Who hesitates? These small signals tell you who the environment is working for and who it isn't. This isn't about exploiting people, it's about awareness. About recognizing that power isn't just personal, it's situational. And situations can be changed. Sometimes subtly, sometimes simply by choosing a different place, format, or timing. The biggest mistake people make is assuming they must win on the opponent's terms. They accept the setting is fixed. It rarely is. Once you understand that, you stop forcing outcomes. You start positioning yourself where things move naturally in your favor. And, just as importantly, you stop fighting people where they feel most comfortable, because that's where they're hardest to move. Change the environment, and the dynamic often shifts on its own. By now, there's a pattern you've probably started to notice. Not a trick, not a shortcut, a pattern. Outcomes don't just come from who is stronger, smarter, or more prepared. They come from where things happen. And that idea is uncomfortable because it challenges something we like to believe about ourselves. We want to think success is purely internal, that if we improve enough, we'll win anywhere. That belief feels fair, it feels motivating, but it ignores how much the world shapes performance. The real lesson here isn't move people out of their comfort zone. That's too shallow. The deeper lesson is understanding how environments quietly decide who gets momentum. Most people don't lose because they made a bad move. They lose because they accepted the wrong setting without questioning it. They show up where others already feel grounded. They argue where others already know the rules. They compete on terms they didn't choose. And once that happens, they spend all their energy trying to compensate. They work harder, they prepare more, they push themselves. Sometimes that works. Often, it doesn't. Because effort can't always overcome misalignment. This is why changing the environment can feel almost unfair. It doesn't look like effort. It doesn't look like struggle. From the outside, it can even look lazy. But it's not laziness. It's awareness. Awareness that systems reward certain behaviors and punish others. Awareness that confidence is often situational. Awareness that you don't need to confront strength head-on to neutralize it. Here's where people get this wrong. They hear ideas like this and think it's about control, about moving people around like pieces. It's not. If you approach it that way, it backfires. Because environments aren't neutral, they react. If you force change too aggressively, people resist. The real power comes from subtle shifts. Small changes in timing, in format, in location, in context. Things that don't feel threatening, things that feel reasonable. Think about how often you said yes to something just because it seemed normal, not because it was optimal, just familiar. That's the force at work here. Familiarity lowers resistance. Unfamiliarity raises it. And resistance changes behavior. This is why the strongest move is often refusing to play where the other side is most comfortable. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly choosing a different ground, a different frame, a different moment. That choice alone changes how people behave. They slow down, they reassess, they become cautious. Not because you attacked them, but because they lost clarity. And clarity is what gives people speed. Without it, even strong players hesitate. Now, here's an important boundary. This isn't about constantly destabilizing others. That's exhausting, and it destroys trust. The real application is selective. You don't do this everywhere. You do it where the imbalance matters, where outcomes are decided less by effort and more by positioning. Conversations that feel stuck, negotiations that feel one-sided, situations where someone always seems to have the upper hand. Those are signals, not of superiority, but of alignment. Someone is standing where the ground supports them, and instead of fighting them there, you ask a better question. What happens if this takes place somewhere else? Not physically, necessarily. Sometimes somewhere else means a different format, a different audience, a different timing, a different frame for the same issue. Small shifts, big effects. Most people never try this. They assume the setting is fixed. It rarely is. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes you are the one benefiting from the environment. You feel confident, you feel sharp, things flow. And because it feels good, you assume it's all you. That's dangerous.
because it makes you blind to how dependent your success might be on context. The moment that context changes, the drop feels personal, like failure. But it's not failure, it's exposure. Exposure to the fact that strength isn't absolute, it's supported. This is why the smartest people don't just build skills, they build range. They learn how they behave in different settings, where they feel grounded, where they hesitate, where they lose clarity. That self-knowledge is rare and incredibly valuable, because it lets you choose environments that amplify you and avoid ones that quietly drain you. The ultimate takeaway here isn't about winning against others. It's about not fighting uphill battles you don't need to fight. About recognizing when effort is being wasted on the wrong ground. About knowing when the smartest move isn't pushing harder, but stepping sideways, just enough so the balance shifts. And suddenly, things that felt impossible feel manageable. Not because the world changed, but because where you're standing did. That's the quiet lesson. Power doesn't always come from action. Sometimes it comes from placement. And once you understand that, you stop asking, how do I beat this person? You start asking, why am I standing here in the first place? And that question alone puts you ahead of most people.